I kind of tend to lean towards the big bikes a little bit. I like the 500+ pound twins just because when the road opens up, you twist the wrist, you've got all that power, and it just makes me smile. Hi, I'm Eric from RockyMountainATVMC.com, and today we're doing our first impression of KTM's 790 Adventure R. This bike is pretty much all new. It shares some stuff with the 790 Duke that we actually got to see last year, but this Adventure R, it does have a few unique items, but let's talk about the motor. They share the motor. So it's a 799cc parallel twin. Now, those of you that are familiar with KTMs know that all their big bikes, the 1090s, 1190s, 1290s, 950s, 990s, they've all been the V-twin, the LC8 V-twin, right? So this is a parallel twin. And part of the reason why you want a parallel twin is to make room for things like gas tanks and intakes. And there's some byproducts too. You know, a V-twin, you have that cylinder that lays back on towards your leg, and you get a lot of heat coming up on your leg and up through the seat. And so with this parallel twin, we've got rid of some of that. Now, you know, a lot of people are going, well, we love the sound of the V-twin motor. And KTM did kind of a cool thing. They've got a 435-degree firing for the engine. So it sounds like a V-twin. It actually has power pulses like a V-twin. It's a really nice sounding motor for sure. With that V-twin firing order, they had to do something with the counterbalancers to get rid of all the vibes. And so it has twin counterbalancers. So it really does make it quite smooth. So, you know, it's a dual overhead cam, 8 valve. It really is a cool motor. You know, you're looking at 65 foot-pounds of torque and 95 horsepower. And the horsepower is actually down. The street-only Duke version has 105 horsepower. So they've actually detuned it 10 horsepower and made it so it's more suitable for off-road. You know, some of the places maybe I don't love the big bikes is when you're out in the middle of nowhere, climbing up a 2-track, you're almost to the summit, you're by yourself, you lose traction and tip it over. And that's not where I love the big bikes. And so, you know, that kind of makes me lean maybe a little bit more towards the 690 and 701 platform, because I like the hard stuff. I like the remote stuff. I like to be up there on top of that mountain. And if I do tip it over, I know for a fact I'm gonna be able to pick it back up again and get going again. And so when the 790s announced, I'm just like, sweet, this is gonna be awesome. This bike was made for me. It's gonna be awesome on the open stuff, but yet still small enough for the tighter, harder stuff. What a perfect sweet spot. You know, I had all these delusions of grandeur that maybe I'm gonna end up like a Chris Birch or maybe a Quinn Cody or something like that, but more on that later. So one of the first things I noticed on this bike, and on the 1090 for that matter, is you walk up to it, and those of us that are accustomed to KTMs expect to see a hydraulic clutch there. It's a cable operated clutch. The clutch is mated to a 6-speed transmission, and on this model we actually opted for the Quickshifter Plus system. It's actually something that the dealer downloads onto the engine management system. And the Quickshifter Plus is actually, it cuts the ignition just a little bit when you upshift. There's a sensor on your shift lever and shift shaft. And so when you go to shift up, it cuts everything momentarily. And so it makes it, you know, full throttle, no clutch up shifts that are seamless. And really liked it on the 690. Let's move on to the electronics. You know, more and more electronics have really been all the buzz. Everybody's talking about electronics. And KTM is definitely not disappointing on this bike. It uses Bosch's latest engine management system, and that includes a ride-by-wire throttle. It has 3 engine modes, so power output modes, right? So you have your street mode, which is the most gnarly, it has the most abrupt throttle response, the peak power. Then you have your off-road mode, which is a little bit softer delivery. And then you have your rain mode that really keeps it so you're out on the pavement on a rainy day, it's going to keep the bike in line. It's not going to let it do anything unpredictable. It also uses Bosch's latest 9.1 lean sensitive ABS. And this is actually really advanced because it's taken into account the gyro of the bike. So how far it's leaned over, if it's wheeling, if it's under brakes, whatever it is, and applies ABS that is appropriate for the situation. Now within the ABS, you have two settings. You have street mode, which is anti-lock on front and rear. And then you have the off-road mode, which is absolutely my favorite. So off-road mode is ABS on the front wheel and the back has no ABS at all. And so you can slide into corners, help you turn the bike. It actually just makes it so it handles like a dirt bike when you're off-road. The big news on this bike is actually the rally mode. And the rally mode has some really cool features. So you have your power settings. So you have your street mode still. Once again, we talked about that a little bit. You have your off-road. We talked about that as well. And then you also have the rally mode. And the rally mode is more like the old sport mode used to be. So it's probably a little bit more abrupt and a little bit harder hitting, I guess, than the off-road mode, but still not street mode. And then within that, so that's your power modes, right? And then you have your traction control. And traction control is you dial it in. You actually have 10 settings, one of them being off. So you have nine levels of traction control. And it's cool because if you think you're awesome and Quinn Cody and Chris Birch and maybe you run it on one all the time and you can handle all the power. A lot of us are probably going to be somewhere in the middle, I would guess. And then if it's really sloppy, if it's muddy, if it's something where you really need to keep the bike in line, you can take it all the way to 9. And that's more like a rain mode on the street. But it's easy to change it with your TFT display, and it really is cool because normally you're told what kind of electronics you get and you have to work within this very small area of settings. And this one, you can tune it to how you want it. It's very, very cool. You know, speaking of the display, they put the new TFT display on here and it's full color. You can see it in the daytime. You can see it with polarized glasses on, sunglasses on. It really is a really nice display, and it needs to be because there is a lot of information on there. You control all of your settings with a thumb-mounted toggle switch. It's easy to get to if you're familiar with some of the big KTMs recently. And you control all that with a handlebar-mounted thumb switch. And so you can toggle through all your settings. If you're familiar with 1090, 1190, 1290, it's very similar to that. Another cool feature of this bike is you can get an optional cruise control. It's probably going to be one of the first things I get. So let's move on to the suspension. So the front forks are WP's 48mm EXPLOR fork. This is the high-end stuff. So the regular Adventure, the 790 Adventure, comes with WP's Apex suspension. So the EXPLOR stuff is what comes on your EXCs. It's the same technology as the real off-road stuff. So it's 9.4 inches of travel, which is 240 millimeters. It also has, you've got preload adjustments, you've got rebound and compression. And they say that it is a stiffer fork spring than what comes stock on the 1090s, 1190s, and 1290s. So good stuff. It should hold the machine up in the stroke. Moving on to the rear, it's got WP's PDS rear shock. It's again the EXPLOR. It's the 9.4 inches of travel, 240 millimeters. It is high and low speed, compression adjustable. It has a quick, easy preload adjuster and has rebound adjustment. So you have full control over all the settings on this suspension. It truly is high-end suspension. So the seat height comes in at 34.6 inches, which is about 880 millimeters. So it's not overly tall, it's definitely not overly low. It has a full coverage skid plate, and the plastic sides of it, seem plenty burly to protect the tank bottoms, but the center section does not look like it's going to be able to withstand a hit. Big for me is the fuel tank. So this bike holds 5.3 gallons or 20 liters. And that's really big for me, and I'm definitely going to talk about that later. I'm so excited. Now the claimed dry weight, they're claiming 417 pounds. That's a little heavy. So let's look at a 2019 690. It's coming in at 321 pounds dry. If you're to look at a 2019 1290 Adventure R, you're looking at 478 pounds. So it's right there in the middle for sure. All right, let's talk about living with this bike a little bit. So big news, big news is airbox. So if you've ever tried to change the air filter on an 1190 or a 1290 or a 1090, it's awful. It's awful to change the stupid air filter. This thing's just right underneath the seat. It's easy to get to. You know, service intervals on this bike. Sometimes I don't believe my eyes when I'm going through the owner's manual, but it's saying that after that first initial break-in, so they want you to do a service at 1,000 kilometers, change the oil, you know, check everything over, that you don't have to change your oil until you hit 9,300 miles. That's 15,000 kilometers. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in good conscience, but that's what they're calling for on the service intervals. And then everything else, you know, of course your service intervals are going to change on how you're using it. You know, if you're in the dirt every day, treating this thing like a big dirt bike, of course you're going to want to, you know, service it more regularly. But KTM, fit, finish, this thing's going to be plenty durable. So speaking of that initial service, that 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, the engine management system, the computer, actually doesn't unlock the full potential of the engine until you reach that point. So of course we had to go on a little 1,000-mile ride just to make sure that we really understood this bike and we knew what we were talking about when we're doing our video. So let's go hit it. Let's see what we think. All right, guys, we got all of our action shots out of the way this morning, and now it's time to go take this thing for a ride, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on how it really performs. You know, and the first thing walking up to this bike is that tank. You know, that's a pretty big tank. You see how it goes clear down low. You know, it makes it look a little porky, to be sure, but you know, I'm concerned about, you know, hitting rocks down here on this, on the front edge and putting a hole in it. You know, talking to Quinn Cody, he says that all during testing, you know, of all their test bikes, they never put a hole in the gas tank, and that's awesome, because I have been begging for more fuel on these bikes, and 5.3 gallons, 20 liters, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I told you guys, you know, we went on a 1,000-mile ride, pretty close. It was a 900-mile ride, and it was an adventure ride, so had a little bit of luggage on and did some camping. But one of the legs, we got 248 miles, and I put 4.8 gallons in. So we still had, you know, another half gallon or so, and that's some pretty good distance. I can definitely deal with that. That'll take me through Nevada and you know, all the big stretches that I really want to do with this thing to get out and away. So the tires on this thing, you know, these have close to 1,000 miles. I think I have just over 1,000 miles on them, and you know, for what they are, they're great. I'm probably going to have something really aggressive or much more aggressive next time you see this bike, but let's jump on it, take it for a ride. So when I jump on this thing, you know, one of the first things I notice is everything's kind of where it's supposed to be. You know, it's KTM's kind of, especially their, you know, their big bikes, they fit me really well. You know, I can go from sitting to standing really easily. What is it? The triangle, right? That's the pegs to the seat to the bars relationship. has always been spot on for me. And if you've rode these big KTMs, you kind of know what I'm talking about. There's plenty of room to move around and use a little body English on this bike. And the tank's a huge part of it, because I mean, even though that thing looks huge, I can get way forward on the bike and it's not in my way at all. I mean, my legs are fine. It's just, it's very easy to move around on this bike. I can get all the way back if I need to. So, ergos, very nice. You know, the seat on this thing is a one-piece seat, but it does have a little step in it. And the step's kind of in the perfect spot for me. I think if I was taller, maybe it would bug me a little bit, but I can really lean back and let it, when I'm accelerating hard out of corners and stuff, I can lean back and let it do its thing, hold me in the seat if I want to. I can slide right over the top of it if I need to get my weight really far back. It's really nice. Now, I'm not gonna say that Robert and Landon up at Seat Concepts, I can't wait for him to get me a little bit more comfy seat. They always take pretty good care of me. But it's decent to start with, which is definitely cool. So let's go on to the electronics, and that's, you know, kind of as if I hit on it before, the electronics are a super big deal on these bikes. And let me just say one thing about them, is that you get this much power and the electronics are definitely an aid. That's what they call them, right? Electronic aids. On the little bikes, not so much. You know, you can control your throttle pretty good. It's not that big of a deal. But on these bigger bikes, you need a little help here and there. A little help from your friends. So KTM has their normal power modes. It's kind of what we're used to. Let me show you what we got here. So first off, we have our ride modes. So this is kind of standard. This is what we've been used to from KTM. So our ride modes, we grab it. We've got street, rain, off-road, and rally. So the ones we're used to are street. That's the most power. Rain is probably the least amount of power. It's not going to let you slip the back tire at all. The traction control is going to be pretty intrusive. And then off-road, and that's going to let you slip a little bit, but not very much. The power is going to be a little softer. But the big deal here is the rally mode. Okay, so we select the rally mode, and now once we're inside a rally mode, we can choose the throttle response. Okay, and inside the rally mode, we can still have a street setting. Okay, and that street setting is going to be the most, it's probably going to have the most amount of power. It'll be the most responsive. The off-road mode will be a little bit, it'll be the softest. So when you hit the gas, it's going to come on the softest. It'll have, it just won't be as violent as the street, and less so than the rally. The rally's like the old sport mode, so it still has quite a bit of get up and go. And so inside the rally ride mode, you can still choose what kind of throttle response you have, right? Okay, so we've got our throttle response figured out. We're inside the rally mode, and the super cool thing about rally mode is you can choose your traction control. Okay, so you've got the throttle response that is rally, and now I'm choosing my traction control. Okay, so now I'm back to my main menu. Now I can toggle up and down. You've got this slip over here, so you can dial this slip in. You can go all the way down to 1, and 1 is almost like there's no traction control. There's just barely any traction control. Okay, you can go up. I kind of like it between 3 and 4 somewhere for a dirt road, 2-track. But if you have a really, maybe you don't want to slip at all, you can go all the way to 9. And that's going to be more like a rain mode. So it's not going to let the back tire slip hardly at all. Okay, and you can adjust this while you're driving. Okay, now something else that's separate from this is our ABS settings. And inside ABS, I can choose all the way off, or the road, or off-road. So all the way off, of course, is pretty easy to understand. You can skid both the front and the rear tires at any time, pavement, whatever. The road mode is anti-lock braking on the front and anti-lock braking on the rear. Now the off-road mode is my favorite, and that's the one that is you've got anti-lock on the front, and yet the back tire you can lock it up. So let's take this thing a little bit for a ride here a little bit. I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about with this off-road ABS. It's pretty slick right here on this corner, and so I can come in and lock that up and get that back tire to step out a little bit how I want it, but my front tire is anti-lock. I don't know if you could hear that or not. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds. I can't think of anything worse than having this front tire locked up when I'm coming into a corner panicking, but the back tire, I absolutely want it. You can kind of hear that the rally mode, it's letting me slip a little bit. I got it, what do I have it on, 3? So I come around this corner right here. So it's cutting my power a little bit. It's not letting me get completely sideways, but it definitely lets me turn. So I played with all the settings. I really did mess with them quite a bit, trying to find what I wanted and what I liked, and I've ended up on this rally setting, off-road ABS, even when I'm on the road. You know, setting 3 or 4 for traction control, just depending. You know, I don't know if so if you guys have ever been like sand dunes or really muddy, where you need the traction control completely off so you can get some wheel spin, and that is super nice because you just reach up and you just shut her down. You know, you change that to whatever it is you want to change it while you're riding. You don't have to close the throttle or nothing. All right, here's a good example of the traction control. So I'm on setting 9 right here, okay? So I'm just gonna, that's full throttle. I'll do it again. Full throttle. Okay, it's waiting for it to hook up. All right, we're gonna dial that traction control down to maybe 3, just for fun. Just so you can let it, you know, so you can see that it'll step out a little bit. So it steps out, but then it comes back. So you can pretty much haul the mail. It doesn't let it get completely sideways. It'll start cutting the power if it gets too much wheel spin, but it's enough to definitely make it exciting. And that's kind of where I like to ride it, because I can be a little aggressive with the throttle and still move down the trail fast and you know, get that thrill, need for speed, as it were. But yeah, the engine is super smooth. You know, KTM talks a lot about their you know, that 435 degree firing angle and how it makes it sound like a V-twin, and I don't know, it sounds like totally like a V-twin, but it definitely is. Does sound a little throaty. I actually have heard these bikes with the Akrapovics on them, and they roar a little bit. They actually sound really good. But yeah, the power, it has really good power. It's controllable. You know, these electronics are helping you, And bottom line is whatever kind of riding you're doing, you're going to be able to find an electronic aid that makes you happy, and it could be totally off, and that's okay. There's times when I don't want any interference either, but there's also times when, oh, go horsey. There's also times when, you know, I could use all the help I can get. All right, let's go back to, let's go hit some street with this thing. So as you can see, I'm on street. I'll show you how to get there real quick. So we go to our menu, it's our ride mode, and we can choose, you know, remember we've been all day on rally. We could have chose rain or off-road. We're gonna choose street now, okay? So we've got street chose. Now we're gonna go in and make sure that our ABS, so our ABS, we've got it set for road. We don't probably want it off-road. We probably want some road. We're gonna set that. And we can see down here at the bottom that, you know, we're ride mode street, and the ABS is for road, and the traction control is on, and it's for street. That's what your traction control mode is. So first thing right off the bat that I notice is, you know, vibration. It actually is pretty smooth. So the braking bias coming into the corner feels really nice. It's not doing anything weird. Middle of the corner feels good. All right, let's talk about this Quickshifter a little bit. So remember I told you that the Quickshifter was something that we had added at the dealership, and it's actually a pretty cool little feature. So the Quickshifter, what it does, it interrupts the ignition when you shift up, right? So it's going to, I'm not going to use the clutch at all. So I'm going to come down here on this road. I'm going to leave my hand just on the grip over here, and I'm just going to bang up through the gears, and hopefully you can hear the motor a little bit. Just on the gas, full throttle. I'm just shifting. I mean, there's nothing. Same with downshifting. It'll flip the throttle a little bit. You know, it's funny, I wish I was a good enough rider to show you guys on the street what this thing will do. Got up to a little bit of speed right there, and you know, from the previous ride too, we had some pretty good headwinds, and there is some wind noise on, I've got a Rye XD4, and there is some pretty decent wind noise going on, but it's not awful, but it's buffeting me around a little bit. Bike just feels really planted. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything funny. You know, I did get a little bit of head shake on a couple high-speed dirt sections, but it wasn't head shake. Let me take that back. It wasn't head shake. It was more of just a little bit of a wobble, just a little, you know, just enough to go, whoa, I'm going probably a little too fast to be feeling that. But it never progressed into anything worse. That's about all it was. And that's funny, I keep grabbing the clutch, I can't keep my hand off of it. So let's talk about suspension a little bit. So, you know, from what I understand, I got to spend a little time with Quinn when he was working on this bike, and you know, from what he was saying, he actually, not really free rein, but he was given he was given the ability to really set this bike up how he would like to set it up. So the settings are definitely lean towards the off-road on this Adventure R. And with the high quality suspension components, you know, this Explorer stuff has been around for a while. He was able to pick some spring rates that actually keep the bike up in the stroke, and I can definitely feel that. You know, I am a person who likes the bike not to be too wallowy. You know, it gets too wallowy and then it gets vague, and oh, I hate it. But this thing definitely stays up in the stroke, and it feels connected, even with these more street biased tires on them. The steering just feels really connected, and I know it has, you know, it's part to do of putting the weight on the front end of this thing and having the right suspension settings. I did have a chance to go hang out with Quinn and work on some settings for the cone valve work stuff that they offer through the, you know, the hard parts, the aftermarket stuff. And I can just tell you that there is a lot of potential in this bike. It was unreal, the kind of stuff and how hard we were hitting it. I mean, you're basically blitzing whoops, and you're setting up into corners by smashing one whoop and trying to get the back end to come out around and slide around, so you're set up for the next corner. And that's definitely, you know, like I say, that's the cone valve, that's the work stuff, and that didn't quite make it to production. It was never meant to. That's, you know, but if you've got an unlimited budget, I'd definitely look into that. But the stock settings are pretty spot on. You can still be fairly aggressive. It's pretty comfortable. I do not see myself hitting any whoops with this thing. I just, maybe one or two, but that's probably about it. You're gonna be sorry if you don't start slowing down. But even with a little luggage, you know, we're talking about putting a little luggage on, and so the big bikes kind of, they want you to be a little bit more aggressive. They reward you by being aggressive, right? That's how they turn better. That's how you get through the sand, the gravelly washes, the big steep climbs. They kind of want you to use a little momentum and go for it a little bit. But the problem, you know, especially on the great big bikes, you know, the big Beamers and you know, GS 1200 GSAs and the 1290s and the 1090s even, they don't hold up under the big hits. So they want you to go fast, but you can't get slowed down fast enough, right? This bike is getting the closest to being able to handle the big hits. So it still rewards you by using a little bit more speed, a little bit more aggression. But if you have to panic and get the front end in the air, you're gonna make it over that water bar. You're gonna make it through that ditch. And that's exactly what I'm looking for in an adventure bike. So pretty excited about the suspension. And another thing too is it's totally adjustable, and I haven't even thought about adjusting it yet. We'll get through these intro videos and start to build this thing, and now that I know what the potential is, I'm betting I'm gonna try to talk someone into some changes on the suspension side of it. So one thing on this bike that, you know, the first time that I got on it, that I was, you know, you walk up to it and you look at the clutch, and you know, you're used to seeing a hydraulic clutch on a KTM, right? And it's a total cable clutch. I was a little nervous about it, but to be honest, the clutch pull is really smooth. One thing I don't like, and it's the same with the brake lever, is they've made these cutouts, and I'm assuming it's for weight, you know, to cut down on weight. But the problem is I always run You know, I'm always running just a couple fingers. I've never running my whole hand on the clutch or the brake for that matter. And in a panic situation, I'll pull that in and smash my knuckles on these sharp edges. So kind of a minor thing. Maybe it's just the way I ride, I don't know, but after a long ride I've got bruises, and actually was missing a little skin on our adventure ride from pulling that in. But anyways, that's just one thing. But as far as clutch action and everything, it really is really smooth. You know, the clutch action, I mean, that's kind of a little gnarly spot right there, but it's not like the clutch is grabby or anything. It's really, you can modulate it really nicely. And then it's got the slipper clutch, right? So when you are coming into a corner, and it's way more noticeable on pavement, but you come into a corner and you start banging down on gears and the back end starts chattering a little bit, right? Well, this slipper clutch lets that engine braking slip a little bit, so it keeps the bike in line behind you. This, to me, is what adventure riding is all about. You've got some nice dirt roads, going through some beautiful scenery. The bike handles well. It doesn't do anything scary. It's just it is a perfect bike for this kind of ride. Throw a little luggage on there, no place to be, and it's just where all the magic is for sure. All right guys, so here we are at the end of the day. We've had a great time today riding this thing. I've spent quite a bit of time on the 790 now. I feel like I've spent enough time to actually know what I'm talking about. And I really enjoy this bike. I really do. You know, there's some things that I'm over the top about, and one of them is the fuel capacity. I mean, that makes an adventure ride when you can actually get away from a gas station. Number two I really like about this bike is the power. It is just perfect. It's the perfect delivery, and if I'm not feeling it that day, if I want a different delivery, I've got all the electronics in the world to be able to adjust that. I can adjust how the engine hits. I can adjust how much traction I have. I can adjust my analog brakes. There's just so many different things that I can do to adjust this for how I like to ride. You know, the suspension is awesome. Quinn Cody just nailed it with the suspension. So, you know, I talked about a little bit before about how he was given kind of a little bit of a free rein, if you will, to get some really good suspension settings. And I really think that he's got a good balance, right? I haven't played with the clickers, so I don't know how much range I have, but I'm excited to start doing that. I think that, you know, the suspension quality is there. I just need to tune it for me and how I like to ride a little bit more. And that's probably something we're gonna address. Maybe now on to some of the things I don't like as much. And I don't love the stock tires. We're probably gonna have to do something with the tires. I need a little bit more grip for how I like to ride. And I don't like the weight. You know, that's one of the trade-offs. We can't have it all. We can't have a bike with all this power that handles like a little tiny dirt bike and not have a consequence, right? So you can feel the weight a little bit. Not so much today. Today felt pretty good, but on our adventure ride when we were down in the big sandy washes or we had the really loose, gnarly climbs, I could feel a little bit. And I think you're gonna overcome that with tires. I think that's gonna help a little bit. And it's just something that I kind of touched on, you know, earlier, is that on a big bike, you're rewarded with aggression. You're rewarded with keeping your momentum. And the problem is sometimes the suspension can't handle it, or you can't get stopped and turned for a corner or something like that. So that's kind of the drawback. But to be honest, I am super happy with this bike. I would be happy to ride it all year long, and hopefully I get the chance to spend quite a bit more time on it, because we still need to build it, right? We still need to go through and get our top racks and our pannier racks and our luggage on it, and play with the suspension a little bit and get some tires on it, and really kind of make this our bike. So make sure and stay tuned. You know, if you like content like this, make sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you need something for your adventure bike, for your going out camping, luggage, tires, anything you need for your adventure bike, make sure and go to RockyMountainATVMC.com, and we'll catch you next time.